This is where I left it yesterday. So just the whole rest of the painting to finish, I suppose. I've gone straight into working on these trees here this morning. I'm going to build this area up and then probably move over to this side, and then I'll go onto the water. The colours I'm mixing in here are lemon yellow, no, Windsor lemon, ivory black, cobalt blue, and some phthalo green yellow shade. And I'm mixing that with white spirit, which is my paint thinner. And I'm using a rigger brush. As you can see, it gets quite a good detail. I'm using white spirit here over the liquid that I sometimes use. It just gives you I find that it gives a sharper level of detail than liquid would, and also it doesn't degrade the colour too much. I tend to use liquid more if I'm doing water or if I'm doing a glaze of some sort. Other than that, I tend to use mainly white spirit. I think with using the thinner, the paint thinner, the white spirit, I find it just works a little bit better at sort of maintaining that strength of colour, but also allowing you the detail. The one problem with white spirit is it dries matte. So when the oil paint is matte, it changes colour slightly until you then either varnish it or put a layer of something glossy over the top like liquid. So what I tend to do when I start a picture, or when I come back to a picture in the morning, I tend to go over the areas that I'd painted the day before with a layer of liquid, and that brings the colours back out again, and you can see exactly what's what. So that's the one problem with white spirit. But that said, white spirit does, when you mix the paint with the white spirit, it does dry quite quickly. So very much the same as the trees we've just done, I'm going to show you a similar technique. Instead of using the rigger brush, I'm going to use a hog brush. The results are very similar. Both techniques have their benefits. I find the rigger brush gives you more of a precise mark on the panel. The hog brush is less precise, so you're never quite sure what type of a shape mark you're going to get, but you can use thicker paint. In fact, it benefits you to use a thicker paint, and the benefit to that is that the paint that sits on there, or the colour, is much more vibrant. The thicker it is, the more vibrant it is. Using the rigger brush, you can use thick paint as well, but I prefer to use thinner paint just because it's quicker. So as you can see, I think it tends to give you a little bit more of a furry look, and to be honest, I think it just depends how I feel on the day. This picture was primarily painted using, or at least the foliage was primarily painted using the rigger brush. But yeah, that's actually quite a good technique as well, and definitely worth giving a go. I also find with using a hog brush like this, it's very rare that it works well when it comes out of the box. I find that I do have to thin it down a little bit with a craft knife, or shape it a little bit, which I've done with this one. This is actually an older brush that I've thinned out. This type of foliage that you get here on the trees, well, in fact with all of it really, it's just a case of building up. I mean, I think what I would recommend you do is try not to do it all in one hit. So get one layer done, try and get it as near as possible, and if you need to add some dark to it, then add some dark to it. If you need to add light, add light. Don't feel that you need to get it all done in one layer. You know, and if you're not entirely happy with it, you feel it's not quite right, it's not quite good enough or whatever, just leave it and move on to the next bit. You can always come back to it. It's one of the beauties of working with oil and acrylic, if that's your preference. You can always come back. The only time I feel it gets difficult is when, if you go too dark, it's very difficult to pull back on that light. So I would always encourage you to try and go a little bit lighter than you probably feel you should. I mean, throughout my whole career, I've tended to go the opposite. So I've always gone a little bit too dark. And for me, it's a bit of a struggle to stop myself from doing that. So one of the things I do is my reference material on the tablet, I'll lighten it up and I'll work from that. And I don't paint it quite as light as it is probably in the reference material, but it's usually round about where it should be. So here you can see the first layers I did were the after the block-in were those dark stipply glaze, and then I went in with the lighter greens, these greens here. Then I went in with a mid-green to do the shadow areas, and now I'm just picking up on some of those darks. And probably what I'll do is I'll go over it with an even lighter area, just in a few separate places. But I may well move on before I come back and do that. And then you never know. Once the whole picture's completed, I can come for certain bits. I can come back to it again and refine it. In fact, I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go in with a much lighter yellowy green. That's not quite there. That's more like it. Now I'll just pick up on maybe the tops of the canopies.